We bought a property, it was a buy, fix, and hold. And back then we paid 55,000, and this was January 2009 now. Now the world is burning down. Heard the stock market go down and oh my, but beyond that, this idea of real estate crashing, not computing. Negotiation is a massive career, and to be really great at it takes just as much effort as it does to flip a house. When I gave him the calculator, he literally came back to me the following week after doing his assignment. He's like, Frank, like over 90% of the deals I was interested in aren't interesting anymore.
Hey guys, this is Sharad with REsimpli, host of the REsimpli podcast, bringing you a very special guest on this podcast, Frank Iglesias. Frank, welcome to REsimpli podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Sharad?
I'm doing absolutely amazing. Frank, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I want to get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live and what kind of investing do you do? How are you related to this world of real estate?
Sure. So we've been involved with real estate for a little over 15 years now, but my background was actually in music and IT. So I was
You said music and IT?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So I went to school for music and then right after college went into the IT industry. So I was a computer guy for a good decade and a half, and that was a fun time seeing that world. You know, a lot of the things that we kind of treat as commodities, that wasn't the case back then. And so I remember when Windows 95 came out, when the iPod came out, the iPhone, and you know, a number of other things that now we just take for granted. So it was a very fascinating time to be in the industry, and one that I'm grateful to have enjoyed and be a part of. So there's a lot of good lessons that came from that that I've grown to appreciate, you know, the older I get. Then I got into real estate sort of the way a lot of people did back then, which was rich dad, poor dad, right?
Yeah, should have guessed.
And yes, and that I got the email. To this day, I don't know where it came from, but I got the email about the 2 hour seminar about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I went, and like many other investors, your eyes go, woo. And we got involved a few months later, and it has been quite a ride ever since.
So you had read the book and then you got the email about the seminar, or you got the email about the seminar and then kind of read the book and got into real estate after that?
Oh, no, the book came later. I'd never
Okay.
even heard of it. I got the email, and it was just, of course, like many people, even to this day, my idea of investing was this thing called mutual funds, right? Or stocks,
Right.
and that's it. That's what I knew, you know, just give money to 401k at work, and that was it. Didn't really think about it.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you had not really been thinking about real estate. You were kind of like just, this is like 2008, 2009 time period,
Yeah, this was
right?
2008.
Right.
I had thought about real estate on and off, mainly for two reasons. I'd had a older sibling, not sibling, but an uncle in the family who had showed interest in it when I was younger. And it was kind of like, oh, that sounds fascinating. But when you're young, a lot of things sound fascinating.
Right.
And then I had a sibling who actually bought a foreclosed home. So that was kind of interesting. I don't remember if that was before or after the meeting, but it was somewhere
Okay.
in that general time
Okay.
frame. So
All right. So walk me through. So you get this random email and you're like, "Okay, this seems interesting." So you go attend the seminar, the 2 hour seminar. What happens after that?
oh, well, I went home and I told my wife, had all these notes. And I was like, look at what I learned.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh my gosh. And, you know, I learned about things like, uh, I think I still have those notes to this day, but I remember it was the first time I'd ever heard of hard money. Uh, the idea of flipping a house for profit, which while that's always been going on, it just never really computed in my head, so to speak. So that was pretty fascinating how you could buy either a foreclosure, but also these other ideas like a lease option or seller finance, which I didn't really fully understand it, of course, but it was all just all the things that we take as commonplace terminology
Right.
When you're new, it all sounds very fascinating.
Absolutely.
And so I shared that with my wife. I was like, hey, this might be something to explore. So that then led to the 3-day event.
Okay. Right.
And we know the drill. The 3-day event then leads to buying classes. But from the time of that first event to us buying our first property, it was roughly 5, 6 months, somewhere around that time
Okay.
frame.
Yeah. Did you buy a flip? What kind of property did you buy?
We bought a property, it was a buy, fix, and hold. And back then we paid, if I recall correctly, we paid 55,000. And back now, this is like, and this was January 2009 now. Now the world is burning down.
Right.
We don't really know that. Like I'd heard the stock market go down and oh my, but beyond that, this idea of real estate crashing, not computing. So we're looking at
Interesting.
houses
Yeah.
and we're like, man, houses are cheap. How cool is that? Right. And that's literally what
And
we're
you,
thinking.
you had no idea like what had
No,
happened with wow,
it
that
was
is so interesting.
it was probably 2011-ish before we really started to understand. So we got to see a couple of hard money lenders go out of business. One in particular because they're like, "Hey, can you help us sell these houses?" Well, I had just learned about wholesaling, but I don't really know it, right? It's still a very new idea. And all I remember and I couldn't understand it was, man, they're asking really high prices, but it doesn't look like the comps are that high.
Yeah.
So it just seemed very strange to me. And that lender ended up going out, a year or two later, whatever the time frame was, I don't recall. But I do remember just those little snippets where you saw these little things happening that to someone that was very knowledgeable understood it, but we didn't. It was a while before we started realizing, oh, this is bad.
Wow.
So,
That is that is so interesting. So you bought that property to buy, fix, and hold for 55, and
yes.
do you still own that property?
No, we sold
Okay.
it a few years back, but it's
What, so you bought it for 55. What would that property be worth now?
today. Well, the market's a little bit down now. So today it's probably worth, if I had to guess, high twos, maybe
Wow.
three, somewhere around there. I mean, I
That's
haven't looked
crazy.
at the market in a
Yeah.
little, that'd be my guess.
Right. So once you bought that property, you fixed it up, rented it out, and then as the market went up, you sold it. And then like what happened? Like you said, it wasn't until 2011 that you really started putting these pieces together. Hey, something really bad had happened to the real estate market, and you just thought like the prices of the houses where you were buying, that's kind of like the normal prices. So did you just keep buying more fixer uppers to buy and rent them out, or what was your business model like for first couple of years?
So the first couple of years were mainly buy, fix, and hold. We did end up executing our first wholesale deal somewhere in there. I don't know if it was 2010 or 2011 when we learned the idea of flipping an REO, which you don't hear about REOs that much these days, but back then, of course, you fell
Yeah,
out of your bed
everyone.
and there's 20 of them.
Yep.
So we learned the idea of wholesaling that and executed that. We executed our first flip, which was cosmetic. It was small, but it worked out pretty well. And so it was the excitement and the newness of it all.
Right.
Right? It was just
And
the excitement, the newness, and that went on till 2011, and that's
okay.
when I left my job.
Okay, so
So,
you're working full time till 2011. Like what happened in 2011 that it's interesting. I also left my job in 2011. March 2011 is when I left my job to do real estate full time. But
mhm.
what was your reasoning behind like leaving your job? How many deals had you done between 2009 and 2011 before you started to leave your job, decided to leave your job?
Oh, how many deals? Whew, I mean, I'm guessing, right? But I don't know. It might have been a dozen, give or take.
Okay.
It might have been
So
less than 10, or certainly not more than 15 or 20,
okay.
but I don't know off the top of my head.
Were you were you making enough money when you decided to leave your full-time job to replace your income? Or you just saw the opportunity in the market?
It was more the
Okay.
latter, the opportunity.
Okay.
If I had to do it again, maybe I would have done it differently. But the thing was, the reason I left was I was getting bored with IT.
Okay.
By the time 2011 rolled around, I worked for a great company. I mean, good pay, benefits, great team. We were very good at what we did, and it just got boring. So it just sort of became like, unless the bigger company takes on an initiative, bigger project or something, it just became mostly management.
I see.
So it was comfortable, and it was a great place. Don't get me wrong. I don't have any negative about it. It was very positive, but I was bored, and I'm like, well, when you have everything and you're bored, we need to make a shift, right? It
Right.
just didn't have. So I remember when I went to leave and I met with my manager, I said, I'm not leaving the company. I'm leaving the industry. I'm just bored. I said something to the effect of, we all have a supercomputer in our pocket, right? We call it an iPhone.
Yeah.
And they're way more powerful now than they were in 2011, right?
Right.
But it just, the industry became commoditized. When I got into it, that was not the case. When I got into it, pagers were still like a new thing. And then Blackberries came along,
Yeah.
right? And then you had the flip phone, the note or the Nokias, right? That you could throw them
Right.
against the wall and they would never break, kind of thing.
Right.
Which, by the way, we didn't throw the phones against the wall, but there were plenty of
They
stories
were
of people that
a very
did.
durable phone.
They were
Yeah.
extremely durable, probably the most durable phone ever. But it was just fat, and that fascination just wasn't really there anymore.
Got it. So you
Uh,
decided to leave your job in 2011. Was your wife on board? Was she working? She not working? Like, what was the like? How did
but
that go down with your wife?
no, it was definitely a step of faith. She was not working at this point because my first
Okay.
child had been, he was already born. Both my kids were born. So it was very much a step of faith that it would
Okay.
work out. It was a
Okay.
step of faith. And if there's one thing I can tell you about real estate, is it will do wonders for strengthening your faith, because it can be very dynamic. It can be,
Right.
the dynamics of being a full-time real estate investor, and really just a full-time entrepreneur. So
Right.
it's not unique to real estate. I mean, it'll challenge you, and not everyone's meant to do it. And
Yeah.
certainly there's times where I'm like, should I even be doing this? Should I go back to
Oh,
full-time
yeah.
work?
Yeah.
But the reality is every entrepreneur's probably had those thoughts. Many have them often, and you realize, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. That's okay. There's a place for everybody to fulfill a role,
Yeah.
mission in life. And, the hard part is sometimes deciphering what that is for us.
So a lot of people listening, they want to be in that situation where you are doing it full time. And going back to 2011 when you left your full-time job, I think that's where a lot of people, excuse me, that's where a lot of people get stuck, that they see the opportunity, they see the potential, but it's the fear of making a change, fear of letting go of the comfort zone that they're in, right? I'm sure you
Hmm.
had some doubts also. I'm sure you had some concerns also. How did you kind of get over that? Like, what was your thought process back in 2011 where how old were your kids back then?
How old was I?
No, how old were your kids?
Oh, my kids,
Yeah,
2011. That means my kids would have been 8 and 10.
8 and
So
10. Yeah, so you have a young family. It's a big decision. Your wife's not working. It's a big decision. So I really respect that you took that decision. How did you get over that fear factor that you had, and just it was faith, or like, what was your thought process back then?
Um, I don't know if there was a lot of fear, just because and there's probably a lot of naiveness in there. In fact, there always is, right? When you make
Yeah.
that kind of shift, we don't know what we're getting into till we do it. But because I was bored, I knew I had to make a shift of some kind.
Okay.
When you have a great situation, you're bored out of your mind, something had to change. So there wasn't like 10 other opportunities to do stuff that I was looking at. So I think for me, it was more about I just need to make a shift.
Okay.
So I didn't really give the idea of being fearful too much weight. Like I'm sitting here thinking, did I even fear? Like I don't really recall memories of fear.
Okay.
Everything goes back to I'm bored. I need to make change. We got to do something different.
Yeah.
And this looks exciting, which again, it's probably a little bit on the naive, almost risky side. And certainly there was some risk there that I, of course, had no idea about until
Yeah.
you get into it. But I don't know that there was a lot of fear. It was more of, all right, it was probably more like, am I willing to take that step of faith to go make it happen?
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought, and this is something that I remember was really positive, is when I made the change, a lot of my colleagues were actually very supportive. And one thing that I thought was striking is there was a few colleagues that actually said, hey, they applauded me, having the boldness to take that step,
Right.
which was really kind of interesting because it was kind of, and I don't know that they were implying I would love to take it, but I don't have the strength to take it. So I don't want to say that's what they were saying. I don't know. I didn't sit there and play 20 questions with them, but it did make me think, hey, is this something that's maybe a little bit bigger than I realize?
Right.
And it wasn't like I dwelled on it, but that thought did cross my
Yeah.
mind
Yeah.
because
Very,
it
very,
was interesting to see how supportive people were.
absolutely.
And they were like, man, best of luck on your new endeavor, stay in touch. And I still stay in touch with a number of those
Yeah.
people to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I also left my full-time job in 2011, and now thinking back, I don't think I had as much fear. I mean, of course, I had some doubt, but it was more the possibility of everything that I could do, have the freedom of time and money. That was the vision I had rather than, leading with the fear. I was leading with the vision of the future that I had. So it sounds like it's very similar to kind of what you went through. And you did mention that if you could do it all over again, you would change some things about it. Like what would you do differently now?
I probably would have the one that I would have changed is I probably would have maximized how many rentals I could have got
Yeah,
conventional financing on,
right.
right? Because we didn't match that out. That's probably the one, right? Like, because it was so
Yep.
cheap, right?
Yep.
And back then, you could refinance into a cheap bank loan, even though a lot of banks weren't doing it. We had a relationship with a bank that did direct lending that did do it, and
Right.
they would finance a $40,000 loan. I don't know if there's any bank today that would do that, but back then you
Right.
could.
Yep. Yeah, it was a different time back then. So you decide to leave your job. Like, walk us through like what happens after that. Do you just go out, start buying more fixer uppers to rent out? You get into wholesaling, flipping. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, the early years, we got a lot into wholesaling. We enjoyed flipping the REOs a good bit. That was nice while it lasted. Um, we always did a little bit of flipping, and then we would just buy additional rentals here and there, and that went pretty well. If I had to do it all, so yeah, here's the other thing. If I had to do it all again, I would have probably sold nothing and kept everything,
Uh,
right?
that's what all the landlords say. I wish they had not sold their properties and just kept it.
Exactly. If that is the number one thing I would have done. But you can't live in the past, right? So we played in that space for quite some time, and that went very well. And then we started getting into bid projects. We did our first full gut rehab, and I want to say that was maybe 2014, 15,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. which that was very fun. And it was our first edition. And then that led into new construction. And in 2016 was when we built our first house, if I recall. Yeah, it was 2016. And interestingly enough, our first new construction project, we didn't buy it with the intent to build, we bought it with the intent to remodel. And then somebody, now to this day, I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, hey, have you considered just knocking it down and starting over? And so that
Right.
was like what? Yeah, right. So, and we had bought it so cheap that we actually had time to do that. And so I remember we worked with our lender and we are like, hey, let's explore this. And they were on board with it. Long story short, we ended up building our first house. It worked out great for them, was very profitable for us. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And so we ended up getting very deep into new construction, as well as full guts, pop the tops, and all those big projects that look and sound cool until you do a bunch of them and realize maybe they're not as cool as the hype. And we did that for a number of years, and we ended up actually kind of burning ourselves out. You were talking earlier about where the vision drove us in the early days, the vision, the opportunity, the excitement. And when we got into new construction, we saw very, without trying to be too negative, I mean, it was kind of an uglier side of the business.
What
And
was, I mean, what did you not
well,
like about new construction?
well, what the problem was, we had a time where it was easy to buy property. It was too easy. It was literally too easy to get deals because we had gotten good at acquisition. So that was good. So what ended up happening is we ended up buying too many properties. And we had this naive thought, again, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm also a big fan, just a quick aside. I believe if you're going to be in business, you have a coach. You have to have a coach that's been there, done that. Not the guy that's
100%.
done 10 deals. I'm talking about the guy that's done hundreds. They've seen the mountaintop. They've seen the gates of hell. So we had a period of 3 years where we didn't have a coach, and that's when all the mistakes happened.
And
The
just
problem
for context, so you're buying all of these in Georgia, right?
correct.
And how many projects are you doing at any given time?
Oh, I'm about to tell you. I'm gonna do it. But what happened was when we didn't have the coach, and we'll hop off that in a second, but basically you can make mistakes in real estate and not even realize they were mistakes for 12, 18, 24, 36 months later. It's one of the things people don't talk about much in real estate is the decision that you may then everything's fine and then it bites you years down the road. And
Can you
that's
give an
something.
example of that?
Yeah, so, and here's how it works. So going back to your number, because it encompasses the answer to that question, is we attempted to do 20 spec projects at once. 20 new construction projects. Now, 4 of those were really more like full guts with additions, which were additions are effectively a micro form of new construction. And we were still gutting the house. So we have 20 of these going on. And where we were super naive was we had this idea of, hey, when we're flipping a house or two, what do? You go hire a general contractor. They're going to do X, Y, Z. You sell the house, you make money. And that's all fine and good when you're doing a project, 2, maybe even 3 or 4. The problem was we were trying to do 20. So what we thought was we'll just hire multiple general contractors. And, each contractor can manage 4. So we'll go find 5 GCs and the world will be good. It sounds good, logically.
Right.
Well, and then on top of that, the other thing that we learned that we were very naive about was there's a lot of general contractors in this country, right? Thousands of them. So if you go to the board, the licensing board, like let's say in Georgia, let's say there's 5,000 contractors. I don't know what the number is, but
Yeah.
let's just use a hypothetical number, 5,000. What we learned is of those 5,000, maybe 10 to 20% actually built houses, meaning the vast majority of people that are GCs, they won't touch new construction. And they will tell you flat out they don't build. They remodel, maybe their specialty like kitchen and bath, maybe they're some other trade like tile, maybe they do everything. But we kept finding only a small micro amount did new construction. So in our brain, again, naive, not having a coach guiding us, relying on our experience in our real estate circles, which again, I don't blame the real estate circles, we just didn't have the right resources. We thought logic says, well, this is a small group of contractors, and what they do, because there's less of them, it's more specialized, it's more niche. And somewhere in our brain, we assumed, and a lot of people in my circles assumed, they must be better. What I learned the hard way was that is not the case.
Yeah.
In fact, it was an epic problem that was created. What we didn't know at the time, and we didn't know this it took a good bit of time to learn this. In the builder space, if you're a GC and you're a builder, there's really three different kinds. There's your production builders that build neighborhoods, your spec builders, which is probably closest to us as investors, and then custom builders, which that's the person that says, Bob and Sue down the street comes to you and says, I want to build a house and tell you every detail about it for the next 2 years. Right. So, and that's fine, no problem. So I actually have met people that took 2 years to build their house. It's very interesting. And so where we went wrong without even realizing it, for literally, to come back to your questions, we were hiring production builders to build spec homes in an in-town environment in Atlanta. And it was not a fit. It was a terrible fit. And we just, again, we didn't know what we didn't know. So I would sit there and be like, why is this so difficult? Like, why are these guys having such a hard time? And I'll give you an example. We had a house, and this was one of the ones where we gutted it, and we literally ripped the entire back half of the house off. Literally. Just, it was like somebody chopped the back half and just demoed it out. Well, this was a house built back in 1910, 20, whatever the age range was, old school. And so you had concrete footings that, of course, are old, and some has settled and so forth. And one side of the house was roughly, I don't remember the exact number, maybe 4 to 6 inches higher than the other side, which is 50 feet away, somewhere, something like that, whatever that distance was. And so, and we struggled because our GC was like, hey, I can't reconcile how to make this work. Now, when you're the investor, you're sitting there thinking, you're the expert. Why can't you reconcile? Like, and I'm like, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, most of these old houses in Atlanta, if the difference is 4 to 6 inches from one side of the house to the other, that's pretty normal. Right now, if it was 2 feet, no one's sweating 4 to 6 inches because these houses are all old and they're all trashed and they all need God knows how much work. So it was very difficult to reconcile. So we ended up having to get a concrete guy directly to work with to figure it out because the GC couldn't figure it out. Now, the GC had built hundreds of homes for a production builder, but we did get it figured out, and then we ended up laying it with the GC. And so I share that one story to say is this story I just shared changed the details, but it was effectively the same story with every one of the GCs we were hiring. And and we just sat there and we're thinking, why don't these people understand how to solve these these problems?
So how did you then get to the point where you knew that, I mean, I didn't know until you mentioned that there's like 3 kind of new construction people, production, and then your spec, and then your custom builders. How did you figure out, did you just like happen to come across one that was a spec builder and like, hey, you're really good. Where can I find more of you guys?
Yeah, basically, I ended up uh, going back to a relationship that I had years ago, and it was by accident. Like I didn't even realize he was building, but I networked with a gentleman, a couple of guys that really helped me understand, hey, there's different segments of this world.
Right.
And we were putting a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
Now, were these builders I hiring in their environment of production, were they good? I don't know, but probably a lot better than what I was getting. And so in our world, we were putting a square peg in a round hole. So once I got around the right people that helped me understand what was really happening, and these were not investors, these were pure builder types or GCs that understood that environment, they were like, yeah, we need to make some shifts.
Yeah.
So we made some shifts and we were able to finally get all these projects done. But I mean, this was a process that went over years because, again, when the first GC doesn't work out, what was the natural inclination? Let's still try another one.
Yeah. Without
And then,
knowing if you're looking for the right one or not.
yeah, and these were guys with experience. And so just super quick, funny story. It got to the point where and I'll never forget the interview. We met a nice guy, and we chatted for 20 minutes or so, whatever the time was, and it wasn't that long. It was probably 20 minutes, and I asked him. Anytime I asked anyone to hire him, why should I hire you? And I always ask that at the end of an interview, and he said, I'll never forget. He's like, "Well, I got 30 years experience, 35. I don't remember if it was 30 or 35, one of those two." And I remember saying to him, so did the last guy I fired. Right. What else do you got?
Yeah.
And then he said, well, I have all these subs. They've been with me for years and yada, yada. And I said, yes, that is what everyone that we've let go has said as well.
Right.
And for some reason, when we hire you, all these subs that you've had for a long time, so much, it was amazing how often they just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. So needless to say, that one did not work out. So, you know, part of the process for us was we ended up learning how to be the builder. And what that really taught us was we got so far away from what we were doing in the early years, where we were investing and the opposite. So we're bringing it full circle. Investing, opportunity, excitement, that's what it was for years.
Right.
All of a sudden, we became a builder. Now, is our knowledge base very vast? Yes. I mean, we built contemporary homes, modern homes, traditional farmhouses, bungalows, shotgun, like we built all that stuff. But we were off on our mission. And so we realized we need to like, not necessarily shut it down, but it basically encompassed everything we did. And we're like, wait, we didn't sign up to be a full-time builder. That was never the goal.
Right.
And there were other projects along the way, but it started with that first batch of 20. And it was a ride. And now we've been able to bring it back to, hey, my name is Frank. I'm a real estate investor. I just happen to know how to build houses and do all these other things. But that's not the focus anymore. That's not the goal.
So what is it that you're focused on right now in your business?
We're getting back to basics. Like, what was it that was fun about real estate investing? The opportunity was fun. Wholesaling was a lot of fun. That was probably some of the most fun we ever had, because you got to help people with real problems quickly.
Yeah.
Something that put a smile on somebody else's face that truly solved their problem quickly. That was exciting. We're okay with rentals. It's a little hard right now because I know the recent stats a few months ago said something like over half the people renting today cannot afford their rent.
Yeah.
And like, so that kind of makes it's like, okay, rental's cool, but you got to be just as conservative. The Airbnb thing, short-term rental, that's kind of cool. We experimented with that in some different markets, and what we learned from that was some people love that stuff and they want to we like it because we enjoy being hospitable, is what we learned. So we're like, in my market in downtown Atlanta, we tried Airbnb in downtown Atlanta. Absolutely hated the experience. The
Why
numbers
is
were
that?
good. I'm sorry.
Why is that?
The
What
the
was it about
clientele.
that? Okay.
We did not enjoy the clientele. They just didn't respect the property.
Okay.
And for some people, it's like they're okay with it. It's like that's just part of the game. I get it. So I don't fault them. It just our first short-term rental actually came in 2012, where we bought a house that was lakefront that we got super cheap. And that house became a short-term rental for several years.
Okay.
And the best part, when I think back about that house now, we still have the guest book. And when you look at what people wrote in the guest book, like that's really what I remember, far more than the house. Was all
Interesting.
it was it was a lakefront house in a community. It was really quiet. And I mean, when I say quiet, like you could walk outside and hear a pin drop quiet.
Wow.
And people really loved the tranquility, the way it refreshed their family, the time they spent, where they would go on the lake and whatever. And so over the years, we realized we got too focused on deals. It's particularly when we got new construction because it was too easy to buy. And we got focused on deals when really what made the business fun was helping people. And so
Mm.
today we've been pivoting back to that place. Can we build you a house? Sure. Can we go rehab a house of any size? Sure. But now it's, hey, is this project going to be a value add to somebody? One of the things that really helped with this was we did some spec builds where we pre-sold the house.
Okay.
And when I think about the ones where I had a buyer before I even laid the foundation, and I could interact with the buyer as we were building it, those were the best ones, running away, because you
Interesting.
could see the value
The value. Yeah.
when the guy sold the house to post on his, and I didn't even notice, I'll never forget, he posted on his Instagram something about he's the first person in his family to own a home.
Wow.
And it's like, and we got to be part of that process from
Yeah.
foundation to close.
That's
Like,
amazing.
that
Yeah.
was that's the fun part. Building it just
Absolutely.
to build it and get a check, honestly, it doesn't excite us. It just doesn't. It's like
Yeah.
I tell people it's four walls and a roof.
Yeah. So
Some are
you're
fancy
doing
land, but four walls and a roof. It's the people.
no, no, I absolutely admire that you have a bigger purpose than just making money, you know. So right now you're mostly wholesaling. Is that what your focus is? And to add value to the end buyer or to your buyer, then they can like either flip the house or keep it as a rental. Is that what your focus is right now in the market? And
That's what
then
we're getting
essentially,
back to. I mean, we're just
oh,
now getting back to it.
okay,
We kept trying to go back to it, but what we learned is when you get involved in new construction, it's like a massive vacuum cleaner. It just sucks up so much time.
yeah,
And even if you've got a great general contractor, the challenge with great general contractors is they still have a million questions. And they should. They should, right? That's a good thing.
right,
But it's still very time consuming, and a lot of flips are the same way. And so we realized we needed to dial that part of our business way down. Will we do more of it in the future? I mean, I don't know, maybe, who knows? But we
yeah.
just know that moving forward, we want to get back to a place where the people part of the business became the focus, not the deal,
Yeah. And
because that's what
then
was fun.
is that what you see yourself doing if you look ahead, 18 months to like 2, 3 years down the road? Do you see yourself kind of pivoting towards wholesaling and maybe doing some short-term rentals?
Yeah, that's probably where we think we're going. Of course,
Okay.
18 months is an eternity in today's world,
Yeah,
especially today's economy, election
absolutely.
year, all that, 2 months from now feels like a long time.
True,
So
true,
hard to
true.
say, but that's a reasonable, loose idea
Yeah,
of what we'd like to be fully engaged in. Um, I also enjoy coaching. Like I enjoy, we learned so many crazy things the hard way. I tell you, there was 3 years I didn't have a coach, and those 3 years was, that's where we made all the mistakes. And
yeah,
many of these mistakes have literally take years to fix.
yeah.
And that's challenging. And so if I can be a value add to somebody about how to handle deals so as to reduce your risk, even if it means not doing the deal, I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one thing when I look back at my house flipping business and even the software company that I have, it's one thing I wish I'd done much earlier in my career is find a coach or be a part of a mastermind. It just takes so many years of your learning. Just being in a group, learning from a coach, it rather than making your own mistakes, you can learn from your coach's mistakes. Because everyone, any coach that's, worth what you're paying them has made a bunch of mistakes. And if we can just go to them, like kind of what you had with the hiring a general contractor, if you could have gone to your coach and said, hey, this is kind of the issue that I have, they would just give you the answer rather than you taking 2 years of your mistakes and learning from it. You would have saved all of that. So 100% agree with that. Coaches make such a big difference. It's, yeah, if I could go back, that's one of the things I would definitely change is hire a coach. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people, if you find a great coach, you will never pay them as much money as they're going to save you.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Especially when you look at as a percentage of the value that they're adding, it's probably going to be less than 1%. When you really think about the value that they're adding in terms of how much you're paying them, and then the mistakes that they're going to save you on, and then guide you towards the right opportunities, it's 100%. They're like worth 100 times that you're paying them. So I 100% agree with that. Frank,
Absolutely.
this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Couple of last questions for you before we let you go. What is it that you do for fun with everything that you have going on?
Oh, that's evolved as the kids have gotten bigger. But nowadays, I like playing games with my wife. I do that a lot more now.
Yeah,
And I enjoy my mountain biking and I enjoy sports cars, taking them
nice.
for drives in the mountains. It's beautiful, it's joyful. Um, yeah, I always, anytime I'm in the mountains taking a drive, not only is it fun to drive the car, but you also realize our creation is a pretty amazing place. And I'm a faith-filled person, so I'm the guy that says, look at the creation God's created. Not everyone believes that. That's okay. Whatever your belief system is, when you go to the mountains, there's just something about that environment that just speaks to your soul. And you
100%.
just sit there and go, wow. And you realize how small we really are,
Yeah,
how big it is.
I was gonna say that I live not too far from Pacific Ocean, and then you go to the beach, and that's I feel exactly the same way. Like you realize
Yes,
how small you are and how amazing this world is. Like everything that we have, the mountains, the oceans, the trees, the birds, like how amazing everything is. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Is there
Mhm.
one book that's had the biggest impact in your life? It could be a recent book, it could be one that you look back, you're like, oh man, I'm so glad I read that book. It could be a personal book, business book, or one of each.
I'll give you one of each because there's a lot of great business books. And then there is, to me, first of all, is the Bible. To me, that's foundational. And as I've gotten older, what I realized is most great business principles are biblical concepts, basically reworded into everyday speech.
Right.
But there's just, there's so many things that I've learned in business. I'm like, wait a second. When I really thought about it, it was like, wait a second. This is not revolutionary. It's in the Bible. It's just reworded to non-spiritual speak. So I always say start there. As far as a business book, I think there's a number of great examples. The one I think I would say right now that's really been resonating with me is Never Split the Difference.
Oh, it's funny. I'm reading that book right now. Yeah.
It's fantastic. And here's why. I'm rereading it now. And the book is about negotiation. And when I think about investors, the vast majority of investors, they don't make it past a year or two, right? The number one investor is the first time investor, and it never changes because most of them, they get into deals that they probably shouldn't have got into. Well, why is that? Because most investors pay too much for property. Like, this is not new information. You've
Right.
got lenders, they're pitching 70, 80, 85% LTV deals. In most markets, that's too high. Now, people can argue there's different exit, and we could talk about that for a whole podcast, right? But the point being, the vast majority of the reason deals don't work out to the degree we want them to is because we just didn't negotiate a good enough deal. And the skill of negotiation rarely gets the attention it's needed. And I understand why. It's not sexy. When you go to a rehab camp, you want to know how to fix the house, right? Like, I get that's what sells. Negotiation, like nobody wakes
Mm.
up and goes, I'm a bad negotiator, right? Most people don't say that. But
Yeah.
really, negotiation is a massive career.
Yeah.
There's people that's all they do. And to be really great at it takes just as much effort as it does to flip a house.
Absolutely. Yeah. You
But
make
yet
your
it's,
money when
yeah, but when you do a deal, how much of that deal timeline is negotiation? It's a fraction of 1%. But that little
100%.
fraction is actually the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. You make your money when you buy a house and you just cash it when you sell. Like people, like that's the biggest mistake I believe you can make is overpay for a house. Once you've done that, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You cannot go back and negotiate. You cannot push the market value beyond what the house can reasonably afford. So yeah, the most important thing
Yeah.
that I tell people is like if you buy the house at the right price, you have so many options. But if you've overpaid, there's nothing you can do. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
So there's just a funny thought. I have a coaching client now that he's getting into new construction. And when I gave him my formula, because we were talking about this negotiation thing, and I told him, go read the book. But here's the thing. When I gave him the calculator, he literally came back to me the following week after doing his assignment. He's like, Frank, like over 90% of the deals I was interested in aren't interesting anymore. I was like, yeah, and I said, that's the point. That's why I just saved you a
Mm,
lot of money and a lot of headache. But I said, but let me qualify that. It's not that they're not deals anymore. It's that what I've exposed to you is how to make those deals actual deals, you're going to have to be much better in negotiation.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's 100% one of the most important skills is to negotiate the right price.
Mhm.
Final question. If you could spend a day with anyone, dead or alive, who would you want to spend the day with and why?
That's a good question. It's evolved over the years. Um, Now it's very simple. I would spend that time. I was actually reminded of this question by a person I met not that long ago, actually. So interesting you asked that. For me, the answer is simple. I'm going to say the same thing this young lady said, and that's Jesus.
Yeah.
Because when I think about how challenging business can be, how challenging life can be, and that here's a guy that came to earth, died for our sins and so forth to save humanity. Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Like, what was going through your mind? It really, when I think about what he did, I think about my challenges and I'm like, we're good. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what happens. We're good. We're going to get through it. It's all good. Uh, and one thing I love was the one thing I'd ask him about would be adversity. It's something we were actually reading about this morning. And I'll close with this. There's a beautiful Bible verse. It says, be anxious for nothing, but in all things with prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God. But those first few words, be anxious for nothing. There's a lot of peace that comes
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And
There's
When life is peaceful, stress comes down, and all of a sudden you realize it doesn't matter what problem comes in your life, you can handle it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Jesus and Bible are the number one answers on those two questions. Yeah.
That's the foundation.
Yeah. Frank, thank you so much for sharing your time, your experience, your wisdom with us. Someone listening to this or watching this wants to connect with you, learn more about what you have going on, about your coaching program. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social medias. I'm not hard to find. Frankie Glasses, you can find me. You can call our office 678-408-2228. You can go to my website, frankieglesias.com. And I tell people, look, whatever your challenge is, I do a free 15-minute consult with anybody. So if you got a problem, you want to talk about anything we talked about today or anything else, I'm happy to do that with people. And yeah, I'm just happy to help. And if I can make somebody's life a little bit better, then I always enjoy those opportunities.
Absolutely, Frank. Thank you so much. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Frank, thank you so much again for being a guest. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks.